Hello again, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Monday, the 7th of November. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this is Scotland at 7. This evening, I have the latest daily updates from Ukraine on day 257 of the illegal Russian war of aggression and imperial ambition, and then I will look at today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. Ukraine has accused Russia of looting empty homes in the southern city of Kherson and occupying them with troops in civilian clothes to prepare for street fighting in what both sides predict will be one of the war's most important battles. Ukraine's Russian-occupied city of Kherson was cut off from water and electricity supplies on Sunday after an airstrike and damage to the Kharkova Dam, local officials said. Serbia's president, Aleksandar Vučić, has said he expects the Battle of Kherson to be the defining battle of the war. Ukraine continues to brace for fresh Russian attacks on its energy infrastructure. About 500 power generators were being sent to Ukraine by 17 EU member countries, as 4.5 million Ukrainians were left without power. Planned blackouts were scheduled to Kyiv and the regions around Kyiv, Chernihiv, Cherkasy, Zhytomyr, Sumy, Kharkiv and Poltava in Ukraine throughout today. Kyiv's mayor Vitaly Klitschko has urged residents to prepare for a worst-case scenario by making emergency plans to leave the city and stay with friends or family. Maxim Kozytsky, the governor of Lviv, one of the Ukraine's westernmost regions, has announced preparation measures for receiving more refugees and internally displaced people into his region, and he appealed for help with the provision of diesel generators and financial aid for medical supplies. Ukraine has received its first delivery of NASAMS and Apside air defence systems, the country's defence minister, Alexei Reznikov, announced earlier today. The head of Ukraine's Byzantine Rite Catholic Church, Sviatoslav Shevchuk, met Pope Francis at the Vatican today and said there can be no dialogue with Russia as long as Moscow considered the neighbour it invaded a colony to be subjugated. An internal rift over the supply of deadly drones to Russia for use in Ukraine has opened up in Iran, with a prominent conservative cleric and newspaper editor saying Russia is the clear aggressor in the war and the supplies should stop. Russian forces are stepping up their strikes in the fiercely contested Donetsk region of eastern Ukraine. US officials have reportedly warned the Ukrainian government, in private, that it needs to signal an openness to negotiating with Russia. And the US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan held secretive talks with top Russian officials in hopes of reducing the risk of nuclear conflict, the Wall Street Journal has reported. Humanity is on a highway to climate hell, the UN Secretary-General has warned, saying the fight for a livable planet will be won or lost in this decade. Antonio Guterres told world leaders at the opening of the COP27 UN Climate Summit in Egypt on Monday, "We are in the fight of our lives and we are losing, and our planet is fast approaching tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible. We are on a highway to climate hell, with our foot still on the accelerator," he said. He said the world faced a stark choice over the next fortnight of talks, either developed and developing countries working together to make a historic pact that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions and set the world on a low-carbon path, or failure, which would bring climate breakdown and catastrophe. We can sign a climate solidarity pact or a collective suicide pact, he added. He said the world had the tools it needed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in clean energy and low-carbon technology. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the president of Egypt, said in his opening address to the summit that poor and vulnerable people around the world were already experiencing the effects of extreme weather. More than 100 heads of state and government from around the world gathered in the Egyptian resort of Sharm el-Sheikh on Monday for 2 days of closed-door meetings and public events to discuss the climate crisis. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon today called on world leaders to deliver on the commitments they made in the Glasgow Climate Pact as she attended the first full day of the COP27 climate conference in Egypt. The First Minister took part in an all-female panel discussion on financing decarbonisation with government leaders, including the Prime Minister of Barbados. The First Minister also met representatives of countries from the Global South to hear their experiences of the climate crisis and what they want to see delivered at these climate talks. The First Minister said COP26 in Glasgow delivered real progress on tackling the climate crisis, with strengthened commitments to curb emissions, build resilience to climate change, and provide the finance needed to reach net zero. World leaders must use the next 2 weeks to take meaningful steps to deliver on the promises made in the Glasgow Climate Pact. For many countries, particularly in the Global South, this must be the COP where the Global North not only delivers on our promises to finance adaptation and mitigation, but recognises the need to address the loss and damage experienced by countries already impacted by climate change. Last year, Scotland became the first developed nation to pledge finance to address loss and damage, and others have now followed suit, including Wallonia and Denmark. This shows just how important the action of smaller governments can be, and I know many countries and campaigners hope to see other countries, particularly in the north, step up and make COP in Egypt the loss and damage COP. Bosses of the UK's 100 biggest publicly listed companies have seen their pay jump by an average of 23% to almost £4 million a year because of record bonus payments. The average pay of chief executives of FTSE 100 companies increased from £3.2 million last year to £3.9 million this year, according to research by PricewaterhouseCoopers. The soaring pay at the top comes as companies push back against workers' demands for pay rises to help them cope with high inflation and the cost of living crisis. Luke Hildyard, the director of the High Pay Centre, a think tank that campaigns for fairer pay for workers, said pay increases for people who are already multimillionaires are far from ideal at a time when their lower-paid colleagues are denied a pay rise that keeps up with inflation. On average, CEOs received 86% of the maximum possible bonus available to them, up from 58% last year, and above historical pre-COVID levels. Just 5% of CEOs received no bonus in the 2021-22 financial year, down from 22% a year earlier. PricewaterhouseCoopers said the record bonus payouts were part driven by a post-COVID boom in some sectors, and in some cases due to performance targets, which were set conservatively in 2021 to reflect greater market uncertainty. Andrew Page, PricewaterhouseCoopers executive compensation leader, said the huge payouts are likely to be met with greater investor scrutiny from shareholders in the forthcoming AGM season, particularly in the context of rising inflation and pay increases across the workforce. Average CEO pay is now back above pre-pandemic levels after some companies cut executive compensation during the height of the crisis. In 2018-19, average pay was £3.6 million. The proportion of CEOs with salary freezes dropped from 43% last year to 15% this year. Research published in August found that the average UK CEO collects 109 times the amount paid to the average British worker, up from 79 times in 2020. Francis O'Grady, the General Secretary of the TUC, has said that the growing disparity between pay at the top and that paid to workers is fueling the cost of living crisis. The last line of defence against the cost of living crisis is under threat, as churches and other community hubs could be forced to close their doors because of spiralling bills and shrinking donations, a new report has found. A report published today by the Christian think tank Theos says that compassion is not running out, but cash is. Donors who have had a little and have generously given to those who have nothing are now finding themselves unable to give at all, and some of those who have donated to food banks are now themselves relying on them. Even churches, which have selflessly offered their heated halls to help vulnerable people stay warm, know they will struggle to pay their own fuel bills this winter. The shocking reality is that this winter we are likely to see charities being forced to stop feeding the hungry so they can help the starving, cut back on support to the poorly housed so they can focus on the fast-rising numbers of homeless, and give up on helping the down at heel because the priority now has to be the destitute. Theos's report, A Torn Safety Net, How the Cost of Living Crisis Threatens Its Own Last Line of Defence, says churches and other community institutions, play a vital role in offering support to millions of people. But they are themselves facing a perfect storm, according to Hannah Rich, the report's author. As the economy has spiralled, we have seen these anchor institutions themselves become less secure. Soaring energy costs threaten the ability to run vital community spaces, and at the same time, volunteer capacity is stretched thin and financial donations are drying up. Dozens of community figures, mainly in Wolverhampton, Glasgow, Cornwall and London, were interviewed for the report. A church leader in Wolverhampton said, "We've seen a lot of long-standing volunteers step back, even before the demand for what we do went up. More people have just decided not to take stuff back up post-COVID. How we resource our community outreach from a human perspective will be a lot more challenging." A food bank coordinator in Glasgow said, "There is an increase in demand for food, obviously, but trying to find a way to collect it and get it to people is difficult when volunteers are stretched." The report concludes there is a risk that churches and other faith groups will close, not because of falling attendance or religious affiliation, but because they cannot afford to keep the lights on. Without action to address rising bills, the financial sustainability of buildings such as churches will be threatened, according to the report. The closure of community hubs such as village halls, scout huts, pubs would leave economic and social scars on the community. Older men are now the main perpetrators of extreme right-wing terrorist attacks, the UK's Independent Reviewer of Terrorism has said, after the firebomb attack on an immigration centre. Jonathan Hall Casey's observation came as Rishi Sunak said tackling channel crossings by people seeking asylum was his key priority. In his first comments since the attack by a 66-year-old white man who is reported to have thrown 3 incendiary devices at a Dover migration centre before killing himself, Mr. Hall KC wrote that it was consistent with a recent pattern, that is, the most recent completed extreme right-wing terrorist attacks, all being carried out by older men. In a Twitter thread on Monday, Hall pointed out that the attempted murder of Dimitar Mikhailov, 19, in Stanwell in Surrey, was carried out by Vincent Fuller, aged 50. The Exeter synagogue arson attack of 2018 was carried out by Tristan Morgan, aged 51. The 2017 Finsbury Park murder of Makram Ali was carried out by Darren Osborne, aged 48, while Thomas McNair, 52, was found guilty of the 2016 murder of the Labour MP Joe Cox. He said the last right-wing terrorist attack by a younger man was in 2015, when Zach Davis, aged 25, tried to kill a shopper in a branch of Tesco in Mold in Wales. Rishi Sunak has been pressing Emmanuel Macron for a new deal to get France to help prevent channel crossings at a bilateral side meeting at COP27, according to reports. Mr. Sunak wants to agree on targets for stopping boats and a minimum number of French officers patrolling beaches. The government also hopes border force officers can be deployed to French beaches, but this has until now been resisted by French authorities. An SNP MP has written to the Complaints Department of the UK Statistics Authority, urging them to correct Michael Gove's wholly misleading tweet about Brexit. Drew Hendry MP has slammed the Levelling Up Minister for claiming the UK had secured over £800 billion worth of new global trade since 2016. The claim has since been confirmed as inaccurate by Full Fact, given the figure mentioned includes existing trade under previous EU agreements and are therefore continuity deals rather than new free trade agreements with additional trade. The tweet came just one day after HMRC announced that Brexit had reduced Scottish exports by £2.2 billion, that's about 13%, over the past year. Commenting, the SNP's Shadow International Trade spokesperson, Drew Hendry, said, "Pro-Brexit politicians are known for misleading information, but this claim from Michael Gove is incredibly inaccurate and dangerous. Brexit has and will continue to be an unmitigated disaster for households and businesses across these islands, reducing Scottish exports by a staggering £2.2 billion in the last year alone. Put simply, Brexit doesn't work." He continued, "It was a false and inaccurate claims like these that convinced millions of people to vote in favour of leaving the European Union rather than accurate facts about the consequences of leaving the world's largest single market." The UK government will not proceed with building a new royal yacht, intended to be a UK flagship, according to the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, ending one of the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson's pet projects. The ship was announced in May 2021 as a replacement for the Royal Yacht Britannia to host trade shows and negotiations, but the tendering process had not been completed. Wallace said that the project had been scrapped as he was prioritising building ships to detect threats to cables on the seabed in order to protect national infrastructure. I have also therefore directed the termination of the national flagship competition with immediate effect, Wallace told MPs, adding he would bring forward the first surveillance ship in its place. Johnson had wanted to replace Britannia with a new royal yacht with a flagship, which he saw as a symbol of the UK's status post-Brexit. A flagship to promote global trade has long been advocated by proponents of Brexit, who highlight what they see as the possibilities for new trade agreements now that the UK has left the EU. Critics have pointed to its impracticality and cost, with its benefits seemingly intangible compared to disruption to trade with the EU and the impact on intra-UK trade from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. Some critics are suggesting that the cancellation of the vessel more accurately reflects the UK's global status. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Chancellor Jeremy Hunt are working on a package of tax rises and spending cuts to fill an estimated £50 billion fiscal hole, which will be announced on the 17th of November in a full budget. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the influential Russian businessman linked to President Vladimir Putin and who has faced sanctions from the US and European countries, admitted earlier today to interfering in US elections. In a statement, Prigozhin, who has been accused of running a troll factory to influence the outcome of votes in several Western countries, is reported to have said, "Gentlemen, we interfered, we are interfering, and we will interfere. Carefully, precisely, surgically, and the way we do it, the way we can," Prigozhin added. He was responding to a request to comment on a Bloomberg report saying Russia was interfering in the US midterm elections. The announcement was published on the last day of campaigning on the eve of a midterm election that will shape the rest of US President Joe Biden's term and could pave the way for a White House comeback by Donald Trump. In September, Prigozhin confirmed that he had founded the Wagner mercenary group, whose members have been at the forefront of Moscow's offensive in Ukraine. The high-profile announcement was interpreted by many analysts as evidence that Prigozhin was considering a possible political role in Russia. For years, the Wagner Group has been suspected of playing a role in realizing Moscow's overseas ambitions, with the Kremlin denying any links. Its presence has been reported in conflict zones including Syria, Libya, Mali, and the Central African Republic, where it has been accused of abuses and capturing state power. Fares on the Northern Isles ferry services network will be frozen for the rest of the winter, the Minister for Transport has announced. Tickets will be held at current levels until the end of March, to help people and businesses, especially from remote, rural and island communities in the north of Scotland, to combat the ongoing cost crisis. Our Transport Minister, Jenny Gilruth, said, "At a time where many people are facing rising costs in all areas of their lives, from heating their homes to the cost of the weekly shop, the Scottish Government is working hard to help them where we can. We want our transport system to be affordable and accessible. This is especially important for island residents and communities who rely on our lifeline ferry services, so we are freezing fares on the Northern Isles network until the end of March. In the longer term, the island's connectivity plan will include a review of ferry fares, alongside our wider fares review, to ensure that our fares policy continues to address the needs of our island communities." Food and drink businesses across Scotland will benefit from a share of more than £10 million to improve supply chain efficiency, increase production, and run feasibility studies. A total of 33 businesses, large and small, will receive grants ranging from £16,000 to £1.4 million from the Food Processing, Marketing and Cooperation Grant Scheme. Projects include capacity building for a dairy farm to meet the growing demand for its soft cheese, setting up of a new venison processing operation, and installation of solar panels at a butcher's premises to reduce carbon footprint and minimise electricity costs. During a visit to one of the recipients of the fund, a family-run organic farm in Aberdeenshire, the Rural Affairs Secretary Barry Goodgen said, "The Scottish Government is supporting investment and expansion in our food and drink sector, which offers incredible produce that is enjoyed at home and abroad." The FPMC scheme has enabled some really exciting projects in the past, and I'm confident that this round of funding will play an important role in helping producers continue to deliver high-quality, innovative and nutritious products, securing and creating jobs and boosting the economy. She continued, "I look forward to seeing how these grants enable businesses to move to the next level, and I wish them the very best." The FPMC is one of a number of funding schemes which make up the Scottish Rural Development Programme. The scheme provides grant funding to businesses or groups of businesses within the Scottish food and drink sector to enable them to develop or create food processing facilities, including buildings and equipment, market products in home and export markets, run pilot projects and feasibility studies, and to run cooperative ventures to ensure more value is retained by both farmers and growers to improve supply chain efficiency. And Social Security Scotland has published its annual report and accounts, which shows that it made £163.6 million in direct payments across 11 benefits from the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2022. The combination of direct payments and those delivered through agency agreements with the Department of Work and Pensions saw the Scottish Government invest a total of £3.48 billion in benefits across Scotland. The results of an annual survey of clients by Social Security Scotland has also been published, showing that people felt that they were treated well, with staff commended for treating people with kindness, listening and showing empathy. Among those who responded to the survey, 94% of people who had been in contact with staff agreed or strongly agreed that they were treated with kindness, while 93% said their experience with staff was very good or good, and a further 92% saying they felt that they had been listened to. This positive feedback matches the high standards reported last year, where 93% also said their experience with staff was very good or good, and 92% saying they felt they had been listened to. The Minister for Social Security, Ben Macpherson MSP, said, "Social Security Scotland's annual report and accounts demonstrate the impact of delivering benefits that help tackle poverty and promote equality. We ensure money goes directly to people who need it the most, including carers, disabled people and families on low incomes. Next week, our transformative Scottish Child Payment will be extended to all eligible young people under the age of 16 and increased to £25 per week per child, a 150% rise within 8 months of introducing this important benefit, which is only available in Scotland." He went on, "I am pleased Social Security Scotland have maintained high satisfaction levels in their service delivery, as evidenced in the latest client survey. We encourage all those who are eligible to support to apply, and we are committed to treating everyone with dignity, fairness and respect." And that is all that I have for you this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to continue to develop the station, and to make new programmes for you. If you would like to support us, then please consider subscribing or donating to Broadcasting Scotland. You will find the link to do that on the screen now. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new supporters to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes. To everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras, or in any other way that helps our work and promotes the station, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can find us on Twitter at BroadcastScot. Please like and retweet us there, and you can find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. When you're watching us on YouTube, it would be great if you would like and subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on that platform. Meantime, we will be here tomorrow with the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please come back and join us then. I'd like to thank everyone who's been watching this evening. Please have a very peaceful evening. Bye-bye.